Hello, you wonderful people, and welcome to another episode of Crime Centric. This being a show where we'll talk about crime dramas that I watch. For today's episode, I'm going to talk about the series premiere of Deputy, a great series premiere, a very nice introduction to the series. Obviously, the show has a very Western aesthetic to it, like even, based on the trailers and stuff like this, I talked about this in my watch list. It definitely kind of has like a Longmire feel to it. If you don't know, I'm a big fan of the TV show Longmire, so it's kind of nice to kind of, it's got that kind of feeling vibe to it. I'd say like Bill is a little more cowboyish than Walt is. Cause Walt, I'd say he's cowboyish, but he's more seasoned cowboyish. Where I feel like Bill's kind of got my personal opinion, a little bit of Walker Texas Ranger to him. But that's just me. But I think it's kind of interesting. Obviously, I thought like the way the episode started, I was thinking like, okay, so we're starting at the ending and going to the beginning type of situation. I thought at that point he had already become sheriff, but he didn't. Basically the dude who had run and had literally got the job had died of the heart, like guys in the episode. So I thought that was kind of interesting. And obviously we immediately kind of get his aesthetic of just like how Bill handles stuff. The fact of the matter is him, just the way he handled that car chase situation, doing all that he did, that was pretty impressive. I wasn't expecting that. Didn't seem like the go-to solution to that situation, in my opinion. But what I do like too is not only showing you, like I said, his cowboy side, but also showing you that beginning of the episode also shows you once again his sensibilities, because we kind of find out the reason why he was in trouble is because he let like a certain like area know that there was going to be an ICE operation, so it's like, which is, I think that's kind of nice, because it's like, obviously immigration is a very complicated issue for a lot of people. I kind of have my own opinion about it. I'm not trying to get all political, but I like what he did in the sense of like, the fact of the matter is, and I like that it's like, I'm here for the people. Even if you weren't here, by the most, legal of means, even if you're immigrants, like the fact is, you're innocent people. And the fact of the matter is, it's like, hey, you want me to go help you take down some like gang members and stuff like that type of situation, sure, but like these people who for whatever reason are here, they're under my protection because I made a promise, as a law enforcement officer, to look after them in their best interest, so I like that. Like I said, I just like his sensibility in that regard, showing because obviously, he's very like not, stickler for the rules. In fact, he kind of breaks the rules, which, you can always do for having, break the rules for the right reasons type of situation, So I thought that was just kind of a nice start. And obviously him, being given this position as sheriff, it's just, especially because obviously it seems like almost like it's not something he even, I'm curious, prior to this, was it even something he was even interested in? Because obviously I feel like he would have ran for it, but for him, I think he liked his position because he knew being a sheriff came with politics and stuff like that. That's not who he is. But even, his wife Paula was kind of suggesting that basically they need someone like him, someone who is purely there as a lawman, not someone who does get caught up in politics to kind of do the job. And, like I said, it's just not a job that he wanted, but it's like, hey, I got the job until there's time for a new election to find someone else more appropriate for the job. Well, I don't even know if they're necessarily doing an election. It might be, but they're definitely going through another process to, because at the end of the episode, Bishop was like 110 days. I guess it's like until like, the new sheriff is kind of sworn in and everything, or at least they have that time frame to find a new sheriff. I don't think it's a situation of like, oh, if you run a new sheriff in 110 days, it's like, I think, like I said, I think it's like a new election process and stuff like that. So it's definitely going to be interesting to see. Obviously, Bill kind of worked, within that time frame. So. But I do like that, obviously, this episode does give us an opportunity to kind of learn about everyone, obviously, Bill's circumstances, his wife, Paula, his daughter. What was really interesting is finding out his wife, Paula, is actually, she works at a hospital. She's a doctor. And it turns out like, oh, his partner that died, Rick, died on her table. Now, that's interesting when it's like, oh, yeah, like, because that's a complicated situation, because in her mind, because it's like when the whole Rachel situation happened, she's like, I get it. You didn't want someone else to die on my table, like, because it made you think of Rick. And he was like, I wasn't even thinking like that. She's like, sure you were. So that's got to be a complicated thing, because even if he doesn't 100% think that, maybe subconsciously kind of feels like that. But more so than anything, It's the fact is that, she thinks that he thinks that is kind of, that's tough. But I think more so than anything, he doesn't blame her for Rick's death. It seems like he blames himself, because he even talks to, Rick's son Joseph about it, being like, I've been carrying the kind of basically the weight of your dad's death, because it's like, he was my partner, I should have had his back. And that whole situation gets even more complicated, because obviously Joseph wants to kind of be a cop like his dad. His mom is super against it. His, Lori, she holds a grudge against, Bill, because it's like, I don't want my son to end up dead because you were my husband's partner and you should have had his back. And I'm sure that's going to be a storyline, like whether or not it's the person who killed Bill that's still out there and Bill's hunting them, or maybe they're locked up in prison. But I'm sure in some shape or form that's going to turn into like, a major overarching story for Bill, or, at least one of the episodes throughout the season, we'll ultimately see. But that's definitely going to be an interesting situation, because despite everything, because, Bill tried to get Joseph fired, but it didn't work out, because now he sees, like, despite kind of how he felt, because I think there was a part of him that kind of looked at what Lori said and was kind of like, yeah, maybe he isn't cut out for a job, but despite everything, he kind of proved himself. That the fact is, he got beaten up, his badge, it was his father's badge, but his badge stolen from him. He still, even, kind of resting, still got the information needed to kind of take the bad guys down at the end of the day. So I think, because he knew that, Bill also knew that what he was doing, he was coming from a place of fear. Because he had lost Rick, he was so scared to let Joseph kind of be in this area, because it's not 100% that, like, you didn't think he had it in you. Maybe there is some truth to that, but I think more so than anything, because you were so worried about failing someone else in that family, that you kind of went along with what Lori said, and you kind of probably didn't follow your better judgment, or maybe he thought he was following his better judgment. Either way, that's definitely going to be an interesting thing going forward, considering the fact that his mom wanted you to fire him. And the interesting thing is too that Bill never actually told Joseph that his mom is the one that suggested it, that he wasn't going to do it until like she suggested it. So I thought that was kind of an interesting element to it. Obviously, we also got our introduction to Deputy Bishop, which that actress, I've seen her in a few things. She was in some earlier seasons of Arrow, and she was in the TV show The Killing. I want to say her character's name in the show was Bullet, which obviously, like, Bullet's storyline broke my heart. I'm just kind of putting that out there. So I'm just like, hey! So it's pretty dope to see her in this. I feel like there was something fairly recent I had seen her in, but I can't remember. The Killing might be more recent. I don't remember, like, the time frame between that and her and Arrow. Regardless, the fact of the matter is, I like what she kind of represents. She kind of is like, I kind of don't, like, Bill kind of, and I love her being like, yeah, dad jokes. Because the fact of the matter is, the fact is, like, she kind of doesn't take Bill's bullshit, but at the same time, there is this level of respect, them, like, sharing tacos. It's like, break bread with partners, but it's like, I'm not your partner, I work for you. It's like, well, fine, break bread with your boss. But I like that being a thing immediately, that it doesn't seem like the relationship is necessarily going to be a whole thing of her, like, having to deal with his bullshit. It seemed like that was a bit of a thing, but I think it was kind of like Bill kind of getting, sussing her out a little bit, but now he sees, like, he can rely on her because she's got his back. Like, she's the one that kind of helps him kind of navigate stuff, being like, yeah, this and that, you might want to be careful. This is the type of place people smile, shake your hand while the other person comes up behind you and stab you in the back type of situation. So she tries to keep it real for Bill. So I thought that was kind of an interesting element, especially kind of learning that she worked at the Pentagon, circumstances led her here and everything. So I'm interested to kind of dive into that. But obviously, like, a big part of, like, because it isn't like you work for me position. It's more so like Bill looks at her as an equal. Like, no, he calls her partner. It's like we're kind of in this together. And I think I'm curious to see whether he's actually had a partner since Rick. So that might influence his relationship with Bishop, whether he's had one. It seems like he's kind of gone solo cowboy for a while, but to be fair, I'm sure he works with Cade and Rachel a lot, so it probably doesn't feel like that. But having a full-blown partner like, Bishop, I think is, especially at the end, we see her kind of in the house with him, his wife, and his daughter. So it's just kind of like, and it's a message he had brought up at the beginning of the ceremony, where the recruits are being, all the people are graduating and stuff like that and becoming full-fledged, officers now. And I thought that was such a neat element of, like, The fact is, this is a family. Look to your left, look to your right. That is your family. They will have your back as long as they can count on you to have theirs. And the fact of the matter is, for the job, you need three things. A badge, a gun, and the heart. To basically know, to believe that every day you've done the best of your ability to look after the innocent. And I think that's kind of a nice aspect, because that was even something he had talked about before. Like, the fact of the matter is, I only use my gun when I absolutely need to, even laying hands on people absolutely when I need to. So I like that. It's kind of like I say cowboy in the spirit and the essence of who he is, but he doesn't completely like fly off the handle like he's a loose cannon. Granted, other people would probably say like, no, he is literally the definition of a loose cannon, but you get what I'm trying to say. It was interesting in the long run how this story was kind of like basically all these different gangs were actually working together. Former enemies are now working together because they all ended up being a part of like essentially what was kind of a money laundering scheme, because this guy that was doing the money laundering for them ended up skimming money off. They found out about it and he kind of owed them like 20 mil, which is like, man, you were heavily skimming. But I guess it's like depending on how much money was coming through, you're probably like, they're not going to notice. And depending on how long that was going on for, that could be how it accumulates to the 20 million, or it could just be a situation of you skimmed some off the top, they found out and they're like, oh, you owe us plus interest, hence why the dude's daughter ended up getting kidnapped. Which I'm really impressed that it was just all Bishop, Cade, and Bill kind of going in there by themselves on horseback, no less. Obviously playing into, like I said, the Western feel of it, but also like kind of adding that cowboy element to it. But still impressive that they were able to kind of do that by themselves, showing how capable they are. I'm curious to see, because like the way they set it up too, because like Rachel, she's a mom, and the fact is, like, obviously she got hurt. Things could have been bad, but in the end, luckily she's okay. And the fact of the matter is, but Cade was talking about, if you decide to kind of take like a desk job, building job, there's no shame in that. The fact of the matter is, you can promote up and kind of not have to be out in the field, which is interesting because Bill, as the new sheriff, not really someone who really goes on raids and stuff like that. So him kind of doing that's kind of like, even though he's in the job as sheriff, he's still kind of, out there in the front lines. Because I'm sure it's that situation of, how can I ask any other officer to do something I'm not willing to do? I'm not going to be one of those people, because it's like, for him, it's like, we're not here. He's like, I don't need a bunch of save-assers. I need kick-assers, in a sense that, like, people who aren't going to get so caught up in the politics of everything, who are trying to cover their own asses rather than looking after, kicking ass and looking after innocent people is kind of what the whole, point of the whole situation was. So I thought that was kind of an interesting element. And speaking of Cade, everything with him and his wife. Side note, the actor who plays Cade seems so familiar. I have to look into it. I feel like I know who he is, but I feel like if I say it's going to end up being wrong. Who I thought it was the actor who was kind of like the... I might be confusing him with someone else, because I was thinking like he was in the SWAT movie. I might be confusing it with some other movie. It might not be SWAT that I'm thinking of. I don't remember. He looks so familiar, but like I said, I could and most likely I'm wrong. But regardless, moving on. I thought it was kind of an interesting element, because obviously, like, and I like his mentality that he has, where it's kind of like everything's kind of a 50-50. Like, and I even love at one point, Bishop is like, who taught you math? But I like his mentality of kind of like, despite what the odds are, whether it's 60-40, 30-70, for him it's always 50-50. It's like either it will or it won't. That's all there is. Because I guess for him, it's like getting so caught up in the numbers, the chances, it all comes down to either it will or it won't. Like for him, he looks at life at 50-50 perspective, and he says, like, I like to be optimistic. And I was like, I think that's kind of an interesting element to kind of have, I'm curious to see that kind of carry over going forward with all of this. And I'm curious to see what that means. Like I said, that depends on what Rachel does, whether she comes back to continue being his partner, or whether she kind of does take like a more building desk job, But the complicated thing of like the bad guys he ended up taking down, he ended up killing one dude and ended up being those kids' father. And now, it's like, okay, because it turns out Cade was a part of the foster system, so he knows what it means taking in foster kids. It's like, for him being a part of that system, it's like you have to grow claws, and you end up clawing at people who are trying to look out for your best interest. So even when people come along that try to help you, you're more defensive about it. Because we constantly hear about Cade and his sister, which I'm wondering what that situation is like. It doesn't seem like he necessarily talks about her 100% in the past tense, because that's why I'm like, I'm unsure whether that's supposed to be like him and his sister are like, is she okay? Like, we see him, but maybe that'll be something we see kind of going forward. But obviously, Bill sets up the situation so that Cade can adopt those kids. Because for him, he didn't want them to go through the system, because he went through the system, and the way the conversation is, because Bill was like, the fact of the matter is, if you and your sister ended up in good homes, the story could have been different. So it sounds like they went through a rough patch. And I think, obviously you hear horror stories about, like, depending, growing up in the foster system, it seems like, you can go, it's sad. It seems like you could go either way. Like, you find loving and caring parents, or you find monsters. And what that does to you in the long run, it can either harden you, and I mean, either way could harden you, depending on what circumstances landed you in foster care in the first place, And I'm curious to find out, what was it that landed Cade and his sister there? Did their parents die and they have no other family? Did their family just abandon? Like, questions like that kind of come up. But the oldest, he's looking after his sister, the one that Cade and his wife are adopting. And that kid is like, you killed my dad. And it's like, I think that's an interesting element to this, because it's like, oh no, like, we're not good just because you brought me in. It's like, even though, despite what my dad did, that was still my dad you killed. And so I'm going to get revenge. And he's like, I wish you wouldn't bother getting revenge, because I don't think your dad was worth it. But hey, he was your dad. You want your revenge? It's like, then stick around. The fact is, I'm very good at what I do, so it's not going to be so easy for you to take me down, because you're smaller, you're untrained. I was part of the Marines. I was a sniper. I know what it's like to watch my targets and understand them. So why don't you apply that to me? You stay here. Me and my wife, we will take after you. We'll look after you, and you get to study me. And then when you get your opportunity, you can take your shot. That sound like a good deal? And he's like, yeah. And I'm curious to see, because I'm maybe on some shape or form, Cade is hoping, hey, 50-50, he actually takes me up on that opportunity, or maybe spending time with us will change things. I don't know, because it's hard to really erase all that, anger, because it's like I said, despite everything, that's still your dad. And for you, you also got to look after your sister too. So it's like, you don't know whether to trust people or not, because even him being, Cade was like, what you're doing, I understand. Me and my sister did the same thing, making sure no one, creeps up on us, so we would take shifts watching each other's back, and I think that's a beautiful, situation between, like, it's a sad situation, but there's a beauty to, like, a big brother looking after his sister like that, which makes me think, well, because it seems like it's not just that way, because it is still both of them looking out for each other. So, like I said, I'm curious to kind of learn more about that particular situation, but also Cade's situation in particular with his sister, so... I also like, we don't shy away from immediately getting to, that typical crime drama thing of like, here comes the feds, don't, like, pulling their weight around and stuff like that, kind of demeaning Bill and stuff like that, being like, hey, sheriff, like, they're having to say it in such a nasty tone of like, we got this, sheriff, even though they're the ones that kind of dealt with everything in the long run, but still. That's definitely going to be an interesting thing going forward. Any future relationship he might have with the feds, I'm sure. But also, obviously, there's that dude that's kind of doing everything he can to kind of screw Bill up, because he doesn't like the way because Bill challenges his authority. So it's a bit of a power play, but also just because in his mind it's like Bill's not the right person for the job. He even set up that situation to let, like, that camera, reporters and the camera crew, like, in front of him after everything that went down with Rachel, because they're trying to be like, oh yeah, they're trying to spin everything. It's like, oh my god, you killed someone while you did that raid and there were children in the house. It's like, the fact of the matter is, you don't shoot at the police, we won't shoot at you. The fact of the matter is, don't act like you're sitting, because if you're curious, Rachel, she is okay, thanks for asking. The fact of the matter is, you don't really care about any of this. You smell blood in the water, and now you're coming to try and get some bite out of all of this. So it does seem like, long run, I didn't talk about it, but him and Paula are good again, because obviously he came there after being shot, to see her, and he does, ultimately does end up apologizing, just because, he's riled up by everything. And I love that she's the one, where I was saying Bishop is going to not take his shit, seems like Paula kind of represents that, because she's like, the fact of the matter is, if you want to quit just because, like, you feel like you've done your time, it's like, fine, I'm 100% support you in that. But if you're going to quit just because you think the job is too hard and it's not what you thought, it's harder than you thought it was, you need to suck it up and do the job. It's just like, yo, it's always like, the fact of the matter is there are occasions where you're going to need tough love. And it's nice to see already that that's what Paula kind of represents. Like I said, the relationship is complicated because it turns out the reason why they first met is because she took care of him when he went to the hospital because he got stabbed, and he asked her out for dinner, and lo and behold, here they are now, all these years later. So I thought that was kind of like, a neat element. But ultimately, I'm very interested to see where everything kind of goes from here. I think this was kind of a very nice start, introduction to the story as well as these characters. And I'm very interested to see where it all takes us going forward. But really, that's all I'm going to talk about. Till the next time we meet, be happy, be safe, live life to the fullest, and enjoy it. Good day and goodbye.